came in. So we do have quorum now. Members of the committee are here are myself and Koreman and who else is here?
Glenn Morey.
There's Glenn Morey. You're on top. Okay, so the three of us are here. Dan Klein will not be here today. He is excused. And we are still expecting Dave McKenna. Hopefully he'll be joining us soon. But why don't we get started? We got a pretty heavy agenda, mostly discussion items today. And I'm going to ask if there are any changes to the agenda. I'm not aware of any. Let's talk about let's go to public comment. We have some folks that have signed in for public comment. And I think they were all sent our rules. And I have them in the order in which they requested to be able to speak. And the first one I have is Jim Scally, who is a council person of the town of Dryden. Jim?
Thank you, Mike, and thank the committee for allowing our participation in this discussion. It's my understanding that the committee will be formulating an agreement that formalizes consistent policy regarding the cost share arrangements between the county and other local municipalities. As a member of the Dryden Town Board, I urge that you move forward to clarify and formalize a policy that assures local towns that when they apply for grants and assume the administrative costs that these municipalities can be assured that the county will honor the commitment to pay local share. Given that when towns assume the administrative costs applying for grants such as Bridge New York, they save the county substantial funds that can be applied elsewhere. Since the county owns most or all of the bridges, the 5% cost share is a fair and reasonable expense for the county to shoulder on behalf of the residents in the county. The need for a consistent policy has arisen due to some objections regarding the Freeze Road Bridge that the county may not pay local share. The proposed replacement of the current bridge with a new one-lane bridge plus pedestrian walkway is a result of extensive discussion among all parties, including the community interests, to provide a safe crossing for both vehicles and pedestrians who use the bridge to connect to the trails in the area. Should the county decide not to pay local share, as has been previously indicated, the burden to pay local share would fall on the taxpayers in the town of Dryden. Given that Dryden has applied for grants to place 2 additional bridges and not being assured of county participation to pay local share puts too much of a potential tax burden on the residents of the town. This would also disincentivize other towns to apply for these grants as well. In the end, the county would have to bear more costs to replace bridges within the county funds, with county funds. In the interest of intermunicipal cooperation, I urge that this committee come up with a fair and consistent policy that assumes local municipalities that they can count on the participation of the county to pay a local share for these bridges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Next, I have Lori Snyder, a town of Dryden resident from Freeze Road.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I support everything that Jim Scally so cogently just reported. And my main thrust is that we have, in very good faith in the community of the town of Dryden, with the support of the Varna Community Association, of which I'm chair at this time, supported the ongoing discussions and resolutions over the last 5 years to come up with a compromise plan that would meet the needs of the highway department, the residents of Freeze Road, the people who travel through Freeze Road, and keep everybody safe meet the needs of the pedestrian hikers who cross the bridge every day. Currently, the bridge is so narrow that that's happened to me yesterday. Cars are uncomfortable driving across when there's a pedestrian on the bridge. So the newly designed bridge that has been described by Jim Scally and I'm sure by Dan Lamb in the future will be a one-lane bridge wide enough for big trucks that the town highway guy, whose name just slipped out of my head. Anybody going to prompt me?
Rick Young.
Thank you. Rick Young has approved of. It's very important that this be resolved in a way that's sensitive to the community that has been working with the Town of Dryden Board for years. So to feel now that there's some pushback from the Tompkins County Legislature after we assumed that they were following along with the plans is very destructive to a sense of community feeling and has totally increased our anxiety about our faith in the county legislator in supporting this bridge that has been worked on for so long. And we did come to a workable compromise. So thank you. I support everything that Jim Scally said so eloquently, and I hope I've made my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I have Jason Leifer. He's town supervisor. Welcome, Jason. Are you? Yeah, he's here, right? Maybe he hasn't called in yet.
Yeah, he's not here yet.
All right. If he comes in, we'll let him speak, of course. Let's go to Dan Lamb, deputy town supervisor. Welcome, Dan.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to address the committee. I think we all know the position of the town of Dryden. We were awarded 2 Bridge New York grants in 2017, and we've been working on implementing these grants very intensely since then. One was fairly simple on George Road, and we appreciate greatly that the county's contribution to that project and picking up the local share and then some. The other bridge project, of course, is the Freeze Road Bridge project, which is complicated and has taken a lot of analysis, a lot of community input, a lot of creativity to come up with a solution. And it's still a work in progress, frankly. I'm dealing with some new wrinkles right now in the project. And since town government is the closest form of government that we have to the people, it's right that we're out there trying to negotiate the best projects for our communities. What we need from the county, and I said this previously when I addressed the county legislature, is a consistent policy. We need, to know that you're partners in this project, and that you're not going to jump ship at the last minute in terms of a local share, especially getting consistent participation by the county. What I'm asking for you guys to do is to set up a policy to pick up the local share and participate. If you have a stated view on a project, make that clear to us. I can say as a town official, we never got a consistent directive from the county on what the county wanted in this project. And I invited that. I invited Jeff Smith to participate and come to our meetings. If he had a view on it, had a strong, that happened. We got conflicting views from our county reps. As we all know, they take a different position on this. And it's left us wondering, what does the county want? I mean, the county has it. There's a county-made sign on both ends of the bridge right now saying, save our bridge. So the county has not spoken with one voice on this. And it's left us just asking for consistency. And I think going forward, since the Bridge New York program is not going away, there's more money coming from the federal government that will come through the state to capitalize this program. What will work well is a consistent policy where the county says we're going to pick up the local share, and then you have a designated participation in the process. So the county is seen as a stakeholder. Perhaps the county legislature can take a more active role in the design of these bridges if you wish to do that. But we need to just have you part of the process, picking up the local share, because we all know these bridges save the county a lot of money. These grant program funded bridges. And, we would welcome that. The input, the expertise from Jeff Smith in particular would be welcome more in this process. But right now, we really need your support on this on this Freeze Road project so we can get this thing across the finish line. And that's about all I have to say about this.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate it. Anyone else on privilege of the floor?
And Klein got her.
Yes, Ann.
Thank you, Mike. I don't see that we have member reports. I just wanted to make a comment, if I could.
Are you on this topic that we've been listening to, or something differently?
This topic.
Sure, go ahead.
And I just wanted to say that I had put an addendum to one of our resolutions at a recent legislative meeting to address this topic, but I took it out before we voted on it. And part of the reason that I took it out of that resolution to deal with this issue was because two reasons. I saw that we might not have had the votes at that time to do that, and I certainly didn't want the legislature to vote against it. But I think why it was going to be voted down at that time is because it needed to be more thought out in a separate policy, which I definitely support. So thank you for everybody's comments today.
Thanks, Ann. And of course, that's what our discussion will start today on a more thought out policy on this. And of course it is. I'm not going to respond to what we've heard on privilege of the floor at this point, other to say there are some inaccuracies from the county standpoint of what our position was and how we got here. But I would like to move this up, but we've got really important other items that people have some time constraints on ahead of this. So we will be coming back, and we don't have any action item on this today. So everyone's more than welcome to stay, but it's going to be a little while on the agenda before we can get to that discussion. Yes, Martha.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I understand that the idea of it being later on the agenda, that was, I think, how it's listed on the agenda.
Correct.
But I'm concerned with what you just said about policies, and if that's kind of left hanging and maybe the public has to go away and aren't able to hear what you have to say, could you at least take a minute and explain what you see as inaccuracies while the members?
Well, they're saying that that there'd been nothing from the county about our position, and as far as long ago as two years ago, there was certainly discussion at the time of the presentation from town officials at the F&I committee level at that point regarding the bridge and at that time a 2-lane bridge, or if it were a 1-lane bridge, the fact that the town would have the cost of the traffic signals and other amenities that might be added to that. I fully disagree with any comments that are made saying that we pulled this out at the end of the process and weren't a part of it. If we weren't a part of it, that was the town's fault. And our good faith, I think, is shown by the fact that the other bridge, we voted the other night to pay the full cost of that additional town money to the town. So it's not as though it's something that the county is opposed to doing. We all know that the issue here is this particular bridge and the particular design that has been reversed and chosen by the town, and in my opinion, for political reasons. We also know that the county was. You asked me, Martha. We also know that over 2 years ago, the county was prepared to go ahead and voted at a committee to move ahead with an agreement with the town on the Freeze Road Bridge. And Martha, you pulled it. You were the chair of the legislature. You pulled that because you didn't like it. And that is part of the thing that's going on here. And I don't want the county being blamed here for raising questions at this point. That's not fair.
All right, if I might, I think what the community is asking for, what the town officials are asking for, what Annie is asking for is a simple, consistent policy, and not any special treatment but for Freeze Road Bridge one way or another. I think the other, to relitigate what happened in the past, I think a major point of all of this is at that time when the resolution was being considered, was discussed and passed by F&I, the MOU that was embedded in that resolution specified a 2-lane bridge. However, the public process had not even begun. It was a required by law and required by the federal grant that was the source of the funding, that there be a public process and that the bridge design be a result of the public process. It wasn't that the public process was pasted on for show and that the design was already set and we were just going to go through the motions of having some public meetings. So it was really, if that MOU had said, we will pay the cost of the final approved bridge without specifying how many lanes or what the design was, I think that would have been fine, but it did not. It specified a 2-lane bridge. And it was entirely clear to the legislature at the time, it was on record from the town board from a prior resolution calling for a 1-lane bridge. So it was clear this was a community dispute or discussion, or that there was an issue. It wasn't a simple, we're going to replace a bridge with the same kind of bridge. It was going to a different kind of bridge. So that was why it seemed premature for the full legislature to vote on something where the public process had not even begun. That would have actually, abrogated the rules of the grant, might have put the whole grant at risk. So I think the point here is not what happened 2 or 3 years ago. The point is, here's where we are. The community has spent a fortune of time as well as town administrative money coming up with an agreed upon solution. And I think what is being requested is simply a consistent policy that the local share will be respected and the town will be reimbursed. So,
and that's what we've got on the agenda to begin talking about, Martha. And thank you for your view of what happened. That is your view. Thank you. And at this point, we're going to move on to the county administrator's report.
Jason just.
Oh, Jason has just come in. I said I would stop and give him an opportunity for privilege of the floor. Jason Leifer, Dryden Town Supervisor. Jason.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, thanks. I'm in my car. The only thing I want to say is I think it's important that the county follow through with passing this policy, because the towns are, it's not just Dryden, it's other towns that are anxious to apply for these grants. And many of these other towns actually aren't in as strong a financial position as we are. So they will need to know with some assurance that the county is going to pick up the local share of these bridges. I mean, the fact is that when we apply for these, the county is saving so much money that it can apply to other needs while the towns are managing the project. So it's a win-win for everybody. I would just hope that the policy is voted on sooner rather than later, since we're in a new cycle for grant applications already. Dryden just put in 2 new ones for 2 other bridges. So it's important that the county make a clear statement that they're going to support these applications by picking up the local shares. Since if we don't apply for these grants, the county will spend an enormous amounts of money that it doesn't have to. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. You weren't here, and I mentioned previously that we have shown our good faith by agreeing to pay the full share for the George Road Bridge. And I think that explains the county's standpoint. And we all know that the Freeze Road Bridge is a horse of a different color. Okay, thank you for that. And Jason, I also said that because we've got other departments that we've got to get to also earlier, we'll be starting this discussion later in the agenda as it showed up on the agenda.
Okay, yeah, I may not be able to come back because I have a couple of court appearances later this morning. So
we are going to, there's no action item on the agenda today. And that's intentional.
Okay, all right,
Thank you. Did Jason come in? Jason Molina? Jason, we're up to your administrator's report, Jason.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. The only
I
thing
might point out, this is probably the last F&I committee meeting you'll be attending, and we're sorry about that.
Thank you. It's been a fun, a pleasure. Unless you do a special meeting between now and 4:30 next Friday, this is probably my last one. But if you want to do a special one, I'm all for it.
We'll keep that in mind.
Maybe we get this policy done between now and then. The only thing I have to update on is that one of the things that I'm going to do prior to my departure is generally around this time, we have tried to do the capital plan, or at least create a draft capital plan, so that by the time the budget meetings come in mid-July, that I would say 90% of it is in place and done, and really it's final tweaking by end of July, mid-August, when the budget starts to come together. So about a month ago, we had all departments that have capital projects enter their capital projects into the system that we have for capital planning. That's now been taken out. Kevin and I have gone through it preliminarily, and we're going to finalize the spreadsheet this week, and what we call the PAR forms, which you understand are the descriptions of the capital projects. So hopefully by the end of next Friday, we'll have at least a draft of that completed. So when Lisa picks up the budget process, it'll be mostly complete. And then if there's changes to it, they can easily make those changes. So that's just what we've been working on over the past 2 weeks to try to get the capital plan mostly developed and in place before the real heavy budget season starts late July, early August. So that's really the only update I have at this moment right now. And all the departments on this call we've been in touch with to kind of sum up some of those projects and numbers as we try to make them as accurate as we can. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jason. Are there questions for Jason? Not seeing any. Let's move on. Let's go to Barbara Ekstrom, the Department of Recycling and Materials Management. Morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
I see Leo's here too.
Yes, we're both here. We've come back to you a year later with an update on the contamination study that we've been doing to lower the amount of curbside collected recyclables in terms of where we started. We have some good news to report, and we can tell you that, we went through the please don't put this trash in the recycling bin or these things that aren't recyclable. To last year was we started the warning, this will turn out to be a rejection at the curb later, and start getting into a good habit, and we'd let them know what was wrong. This time, we're going to give you the results of the warning phase. And then, of course, next year, we'll give you the results of the rejection phase, which we're in now. So I'll turn this over to Leo, and he can give you an update on the attachment that's in your packet.
Good morning, everybody. As Barb mentioned, so we implemented a curbside recycling enforcement plan back in January of 2020. The goal of that plan was to decrease the contamination primarily in the curbside recyclables that are collected at the curb residents. There are some small businesses as well. I mentioned that the plan had 3 phases they happened primarily during the collection phase, or the collection process, I should say. We had the awareness phase where people would receive what we referred to as please stickers. So that was a polite way of saying we've got some contamination in those bins, and we informed them of the contaminants and educated them that way. We had the warning phase, which again, we changed up the decal itself to be a warning instead of a please. And that was just letting them know unacceptable items were in the bin, and that it may not be collected in the future. So that kind of led up to our rejection phase that we actually started in November of 2020. That phase, we would inform residents through, again, the decal on the bin that the contents of the bin has been rejected and why. Those 3 phases also had an educational component to it, where we would issue press releases, website, social media postings, as well as the stickers on the bin acted as an educational component. So to measure the decrease of the contamination, we had put together the audit report. What we did with the audit was we took collection samples from 4 different routes, and we pulled out all the contaminants or residue that didn't belong in the recycling. All that was weighed, and we came up with a contamination rate or percent contamination. Back in January of 2020 was our first audit report that kind of benchmarked things. That rate was 5.37% on average of the 4 routes that we sampled. In January of 2021, the one that we just finished up, as we had gotten into the rejection phase, that contamination rate has been reduced to 3.94%. All 4 sample routes actually had decreased in the contamination. I can say the positive results, I think, really hinged on the education that was provided, the outreach that was provided. The gentleman in our department, Jeremy Betterly, communications coordinator, that had done a lot of work on to that. The one nice thing or good thing I should say, that came out of the education, the outreach, was the fact that it really kept the complaint calls, calls from residents coming into our office, kind of wondering why their bin was rejected or why it wasn't taken. I think, the outreach that ahead of all of that really helped to hold those calls somewhat at bay. So I think we're certainly happy with the results, and I don't know if Barb has anything else.
Yeah, I just have 2 quick things, Leo. Thank you. We really are going to see some progress in our report to you next year, because that'll be a full year of the rejection phase. And here's what gets my attention. We've got 44,000 places where we collect residential units, and we are down to about 100 rejections a week. A week, 200 every other week, and maybe 500 a month. That's just unbelievably good compared to the rest of the state, the rest of the country. Typically, they're averaging 15 to 20%, and even as high as 25%. I've got to give credit to the collectors from Casella as well. They really put their heart and their soul into this. And we're seeing COVID was a little setback in terms of, everybody focusing on this, but we really are in very good shape. Our missed collections, Leo, you might want to say are very, very low also, right? I mean, it's practically none anymore.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, we might get a couple a day, which when we're.
Of so many, but I mean, we used to have at its worst, when we had to take action, I think we were at like 1,000, what was it, per week or something? I mean, it's a crazy number.
That'd be monthly.
Monthly, okay. But in any event, you know, we want to keep reporting to you, see if you have any feedback, and keep doing what we're doing, and, you know, throw ourselves a little pizza party attaboy, and keep it going. But the enforcement plan is critical. If you don't help people to really, you know, give warning, you know, we've been trying for 20 years to educate. Now we're stepping it up.
Yeah, one last thing, if I might, it's a pretty positive thing, is
Certainly.
it makes sense, is that during this last audit, we seen very few, if any, plastic bags, the plastic bags. So, you know, I guess kind of tie that in with our plastic bag ban, and, you know, the bags are definitely being.
So Leo, what are you seeing still?
Well, one of the things that we see is more of the confusing items, plastics, for instance. We accept 1s, 2s, and 5s. There can be some confusing items that are really even difficult for the collector to look at and determine if it's acceptable or unacceptable. You know, as an example, your clam shells that you might see in the store that you buy at Wegmans, a sandwich at Wegmans. Those clam shells could be made out of a 1, 2, 6, 7, and to look at them, you wouldn't know the difference. So a lot of the confusing items still remain.
How about styrofoam, which is about to be banned in the state starting next year?
Styrofoam's been reduced as well.
Okay.
It's not, you know, I don't think we would call that one of the more common items, unacceptable items any longer. It's really probably more some plastic items, films that are still confusing. But I think we might see some changes with how acceptable recyclables might be marked in the future.
There's a big change coming. I was listening to the New York State Federation conference yesterday, and there is going to be, not only in New York State, but in the country, there are going to be standards, and the numbers are going to be made clearer. They're going to be made bigger, and there's going to be clarity about programs. The state has launched a Recycle Right program, and I feel confident that in a year we're going to see some changes that make it better and easier. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Barbara and Leo. Questions? I have Ann.
Thanks, Barbara and Leo. I really give big kudos to your department for all the work you've done, including on this area. I'm glad to see the contamination rate is going down. I had one constituent recently. I was talking to them. They didn't call me just about this, but something else, and they said, oh, well, wasn't too happy to see about the recycling fee go up. And so I talked to them about that, and they were saying they just, you know, about what's recyclable and what are some of the reasons for that price increase. And they said, well, it's too much of a bother for them to look at the numbers, and, you know,
well, if it is, don't put it in. That's really the message.
Right. And that's what I said to them. And
yeah.
They said, well, you know, it's just really convenient for them just to shove everything in there. And I said, well, and I talked to them about how what the contamination does and raises our prices, and it's not good for the product that comes out of that. and the amount of time and all the different things, and so, and I said, and then, you complain about the price, because that's part of the reason that, it's not the entire reason, but it's part of the reason that the price goes up. So I'm glad to hear too, that the numbers are going to get bigger, because sometimes, my vision's not the best, but still I'm like holding things up to the light, or, try to get the, because sometimes those numbers are so teeny for recycling. And I just also wanted to say to committee members or anybody else watching, your department is going to be giving us some updates on some other issues on Monday at the peak meeting. So if people wanted to tune in then, the procurement policy for the county, the styrofoam ban, reusable bag distribution. So if people want to tune in Monday to 1:30 and hear more about that stuff.
Thanks, Ann. Other questions for Barbara? Barbara, I had a question. Well, first of all, I want to compliment you on this report. It's very readable, very understandable. The pictures are great, help us. And I know it took some time to put it together, and I really appreciate that.
Well, we need to thank Seth Dennis, who works for Leo as waste recycling.
Send our thanks to
He's actually on vacation, so we let him off the hook.
Okay. The other question I have is, how does this relate financially? What does a 3 to 5% contamination rate in our recyclable sales mean to us? Does it mean let me just finish. Do we get less money, or is this acceptable? They don't care. What is it?
What it means is that we're not, when everything is congregated in Ontario County, we know that our material isn't causing load rejections, which ultimately helps everyone. But in addition, it will prevent us from getting a surcharge when the material is delivered to the facility. And that can be very expensive because they have a contamination surcharge there. So basically it's cost avoidance.
Okay, so give me an idea. What's the surcharge? Is it a per ton charge or something if they surcharge it?
Yeah, there's different things that they do. It's a little more complicated than having it be just one charge. But again, the industry has developed their standards for what, they don't want to be charged by the mills or any of the others. Leo, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, like, for instance, much like, we may reject a bin at the curb, when this material is processed, baled, and there's a large percentage of contamination in it, that goes to a mill, that could be rejected by the mill. Doesn't even come off the truck, they send it back. There's certainly no revenue for that because they didn't accept it, but then there would be those transportation charges and fees that we'd still have to pay a portion of.
And they would be able to identify that bale as coming from Tompkins County?
Well, I was coming from the facility it's going to, but the facility is identifying it from Tompkins County. And that's where our surcharge would come in.
Okay. All right,
It's a good,
I understand. Go ahead, Leo.
Well, I was just going to say it's a good point, and I would hope that we would be able to use that data as a bargaining tool.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Makes sense. All right, anything else?
We just have the one information only billing.
Any questions on that? Not seeing any. I guess that's satisfactory. Go ahead.
Just for information, in July, we're going to be coming to you with information on the food scrap ban in New York State. They are finalizing right now, which stores, in terms of the tonnage requirement of, it's 104 tons a year. And that would be like prevented from going to a landfill. And there's regulations about it. There's an information sheet that's being finalized. We will get everything by the end of June from the state, and then we'll come to you and let you know what's going on. It doesn't apply to a lot of the places in Tompkins County. I mean, Wegmans and, large generators. However, there's probably about a dozen that we originally identified. There might be more now. But we'll let you know what our role is, which is not too much, but education. And then it's going to turn into, in a year or two, it'll be half that, and there'll be a lot more businesses that are going to have to do composting. And we do have a vendor that picks that material up. So we'll talk about that in July.
At some point, the committee wants to review how the new contract is working with the operator later on when you have more time, maybe in the fall or something, but that's one of the things.
Absolutely, and we'll have enough information.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Okay, we've got several things at the airport. And we have first, is Mr. Murphy here?
Yes.
Yes, we want to welcome Andrew Murphy from Cornell, who is going to talk to us about the annual report on the airport disposal sites that Cornell used to use.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
Welcome.
My name is Andrew Murphy. I'm with Cornell University's Environment, Health, and Safety Department. Here to discuss the 2 remediation sites located on Snyder Road, directly north of the airport. I can provide a little bit of history and some recent observations. I guess just context, I mean, this is a requirement of our license to enter the airport property. And I guess I just wanted to acknowledge and thank, the airport staff for their understanding and willingness to work with us over the years. I think we've developed a good working relationship. Am I allowed to share my screen if it helps?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Anybody, do you want questions as you go along, or you want to wait till the end?
Whatever's convenient. We can take them as we go.
All right. So if folks want to interrupt for a question, please sing out if he's got his screen sharing, because I won't see you necessarily, although we may be able to see your hands if you put them up.
I'll limit the screen sharing towards the end.
All right.
So just a little bit of history. I mean, the sites handled Cornell lab wastes from roughly the 50s to the mid 70s. After that time, there were multiple investigations into the sites that revealed that they had contaminated the local groundwater, and that contamination had extended onto the airport property. Contaminants included from the CDS solvents such as trichloroethene, dichloroethene, things of that nature. The contaminant of concern at the other site, the RDS radiation disposal site, is paradioxane or 1,4-dioxane. So eventually Cornell entered into consent agreement with New York State to remediate the sites and the contaminated groundwater. Those remedial actions included installation of low permeability barriers over and around the sites to isolate the wastes, as well as multiple different groundwater collection systems and a central treatment system. Remedial construction was completed in 2004, essentially. Since that time, we are doing the care and feeding of those sites. We are operating the systems, maintaining the systems, monitoring their effectiveness, monitoring the groundwater at the sites and on the airport. Our work is all reported to the DEC, where the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and we are routinely inspected by them as well. Our monthly monitoring of our groundwater treatment plant indicates that we are effectively meeting our discharge criteria. The groundwater itself, there is certainly seasonal fluctuations, but we do see the long-term data indicates that there is overall decreases in the aerial extent and the extent or the levels, the strength of contamination, the concentrations. Since I present to you guys fairly regularly, we don't always see, massive decreases, but I can present to you some recent observations with, if I share the screen as I had indicated.
Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see.
Don't feel bad. We always have that kind of problem.
Yeah, right. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So I just provided this real quick just to give you an overview of where we're talking about. This is the airport, the airstrip in a northwest to southeast direction. This is Warren Road heading roughly north. This is Snyder Road on the northern boundary of the airport, and these are our two disposal sites. So just to orient you. The sites themselves, I'll start with the radiation disposal site. As I mentioned, the contaminant of concern is 1,4-dioxane. Again, to orient you, this box here represents the limits of the disposal site. This road here, which is a little bit grayed out, it's kind of in the background, but this is Snyder Road. So everything south of here is the airport. Each of these circles represents a monitoring well that is drilled into the ground and is screened at an interval such that we can collect a sample and send it out for environmental analysis to understand the levels of concentration. So this figure is a snapshot in time. This is from September of 2020. As I mentioned, there are seasonal fluctuations. We generally present this for the September sampling event because it generally is some of the highest concentrations through the year. This is my basic estimation of the 50 part per billion concentration line. So you'll see it extends briefly onto the airport property south of Snyder Road, higher concentrations located closer to the site itself.
I'm listening.
Is there a question I can answer?
Dave? Is there a question, Dave?
No, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. And on the other site, the CDS, the chemical disposal site, again, to orient folks, this rectangle here represents the disposal site proper. This grayed out box here is our groundwater treatment plant. This is located a little bit southeast of the previous site that I just mentioned, the RDS. Local groundwater generally heads in a southwest direction, again, onto the airport property, unfortunately. So again, this is a snapshot in time for September of 2020. These concentration lines represent total VOCs, volatile organic compounds. It's the summation of different compounds that we analyze for multiple kind of solvents that I mentioned earlier. So TCE, DCE, and the like. So this line right here represents our plume collection system, and we actually extract contaminated groundwater, bring it back to our groundwater treatment plant system, treat it and discharge it. But similarly, this shows the extents of the plume. This outer line is a 5 part per billion concentration. So these are the figures I typically go over with you guys during these sessions. I can answer questions at this point. We continue to, there's no significant changes in plans. We continue to monitor the groundwater plume and respond accordingly. We're looking to obviously always maintain our systems in good working order to avoid any upsets. And we are certainly looking to optimize and simplify systems if and when, the data indicate that we can do that.
Okay, let's ask other questions about this report. We appreciate your report, Andrew.
Thank you.
I had a couple. And well, first I want to ask Mike. Mike, Mike Hall, do you have any questions about this report as airport director?
No, I don't. The situation has been very stable, for the last decade or more. That's about as far back as I've been aware of it. And, we were very fortunate that this was a Cornell event and that Cornell has invested heavily in keeping track of what's going on. We might not have been so fortunate if it had been a company that left the area or whatever. So we're comfortable with what's happening out here and very appreciative of everything Andrews and Cornell are doing.
Thank you. I wondered, so my understanding is the plumes really haven't changed much. Is that right? The two sites, the plume into the airport land.
Right. So as I mentioned, there's not significant, we're not seeing significant decreases at this point in time since we've been doing it for quite a while, but long-term trends indicates a shrinking aerial extent as well as just decreasing concentrations with time. Does that answer that question?
So yeah, so it's not expanding, right?
No.
That's the point I'm trying to make, or have you make, if you can, please. That's the way I read it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's the correct statement.
Okay, now I guess that was the main question I wanted to ask. Anyone else? Oh, I had one other question. Let me just, and then I'll get you in. How frequently do you sample the wells?
We sample the wells on a quarterly basis. So March, March, June, September, December, I think. Yeah.
And that's for both sites? Correct. Thank you. Ann?
Thank you for the presentation, Andrew. So one question I have is that because you're saying the concentrations and the plume perimeters seem to be shrinking a little bit, is it because these particular contaminants, and maybe you don't know this question, do they have actual half-lives? Do you have a reason that you can propose that why this site is getting better a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's primarily due to the interventions we've implemented. There is, biological degradation of these materials does occur. We don't rely on that in any way, shape, or form. We're focusing on the more mechanical interventions that we've installed out at this site. So that's I believe the primary reason for the decreases. Both the groundwater collection as well as I mentioned, the sites themselves have been contained and they've been capped and isolated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you for coming this morning, and we appreciate the advance report and your discussion of it today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, the next one, I think it's going to take a little discussion. You recall that several months ago, we began talking about, what happens at the airport with the money that's been allocated by the federal government from the stimulus programs. And there was a couple of ways to go. Mike Hall was talking about using as much as we could for capital. Jason was talking about be careful, it may be needed for operations. And we asked Jason and Mike to go to work on this and come back with us with some kind of a unified recommendation. In my view, if we didn't, we needed some options for us to decide policy. And I think that they have talked about this, and I'm not going to put any words in either of their mouths, but I know we got sent as part of this a report from the Recondo company on the financial situation of the airport. So who wants to start? Mike? Jason?
I'd be happy to. A little bit of Airport 101 to start off with.
You're a little bit faint. Can you get a little closer?
Okay, how's that?
That's better.
Okay, I'll yell. We're a business unit, and we have a business budget of around $3.5 million a year. It's pretty stable over time, grows slowly, incrementally. And much of that is fixed cost. We cannot shut down the terminal or shut down the runway or do some of the things that a business might do in dire financial times. About 75% of that budget is airline activity. And the cost centers that relate to the airlines are varied. There are fixed costs like rent, and then there are variable costs like landing fees. And of course, you're all aware that during the last 18 months, there's been tremendous turbulence within the entire industry. You can say, therefore, tremendous turbulence within 75% of our budget and more. When our budget for 2021 was put together, it was almost a year ago. And at that point, it was very unclear what sources of support the airports might get. The airlines got a tranche early on just to keep them in business. And then subsequently, the federal government, through 3 different tranches, each with slightly different implementing requirements, has granted us roughly $5 million, not to subsidize the airlines, but to keep the airport operating, recognizing from the federal level that airports have to stay open in order for us to have a basis for recovery, which we're beginning to get into right now. So between roughly $1 million in the airport fund balance, which varies from time to time, plus $5 million of federal assistance to the airport, you could look at this from a business standpoint and say we have something on the order of $6 million worth of cash reserves. 2020 started off very strong. And we expect to get back to those kinds of levels, assuming a positive recovery from the pandemic. We used in the order of $1 million to help defray some of the airport operating expenses during 2020. So the 6 becomes 5, or if you want to consider this just to be federal grant money, the 5 becomes 4. When we put our budget together last summer, nobody really knew what was going to happen. I mean, just think about where we were pandemic-wise. Things were starting to look a little bit better. People were saying, this thing will go away over the summer, and by the time we get to the fall, we'll be in good shape again. Of course, that was hardly the case. And so we also didn't have the entire support from the federal government at that point. As I said, there were 3 tranches, the last of which arrived in 2021. So we felt it was appropriate to go back and visit the budget. And, our discipline was that we wanted to get through this difficult period, expending money that was necessary to be spent on operations, but always keeping our eye on the possibility that some of it could be used otherwise. And the federal money from 60,000 feet can be used to pay current operating expenses or to pay financing expenses, the kinds of things that, that drive our budget. So now I'm going to talk for a second about how the airlines look at their rental of the opportunity to serve the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport. And there are a lot of things involved there. As I mentioned, the square foot rental for airport counters, landing fees, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It all gets mixed together and divided by the number of passengers that get on the planes that come here. And that becomes something known as the cost per enplanement. And it's sort of a big lagging indicator to the airlines. Needless to say, with what happened in 2020, our CPE went up significantly in 2020. We don't have a final number on it yet, but it's going to be high. Now, first of all, a history of CPE at Ithaca. Ithaca is a financially independent unit with regard to county general funding. That is not true for most other airports. In fact, all other airports that I'm aware of our size. The municipality that is associated with the airport puts in a significant amount of money, over $1 million in the case of Binghamton and Elmira from general fund money. We don't do that, and we're able to stay afloat because we're very, very focused on cost control measures. However, with 3/4 of our budget related to airline activity, our cost for employment in Ithaca has been historically high. So it's always been an issue with the airlines that, hey, we're paying more money to serve Ithaca. It has also been an issue for our consumers because they pass it on through ticket prices. So often the ticket prices out of Ithaca have been higher, and that was because the airlines were interested in profitable service, including a place that has a high CPE. In fact, our CPE, a few years ago was over 3 times the national average for airports like us. So we've been bringing the CPE down. Every year it's come down as we've introduced more cost-conscious measures and improved our management and what have you. And we're down, into the mid to upper teens going into 2020 and off to a great start in January and February. And then, of course, the wheels fell off. Well, the airlines are looking at, forecast CPE for 2020, and they're getting very alarmed. And so they came to us just about the time the budget was passed in the fall for 2021 and said, look, this whole thing is a very difficult period for all of us, the airlines and the airport. And we need, in order to serve Ithaca, we need you to make a significant investment in operating dollars out of the 3 federal tranches that you've received. So we went through a series of discussions and trying to figure out what that would look like. And you have a little bit of a dated set of slides that if you want to go into them in detail, I'll be happy. In fact, would appreciate the chance to talk to any of you individually about it. But to go through the whole thing right now would be pretty difficult. So if you want to bring up slide 4, Katrina, that would be the one that is easiest to talk around. And it'll explain why we made a decision.
Katrina doesn't have the slides.
Okay.
She's telling me. Can someone, Jason, do you have them?
Everybody's agenda packet has copies of the slides in it. So if you go to slide 4.
Page 29.
That's
on page 29.
Okay, page 29, slide 4. So, looking at 2021, when we put the budget together last summer, we didn't really know much about what it was going to look like at this point in time. Now we know a lot better what it looks like in this point in time. And furthermore, when I said that CPE was a lagging indicator, we also have some leading indicators of the business at the airport. And the biggest leading indicator is the number of seats that the airlines are planning to put into service in Ithaca. And obviously, remember in the calculation of CPE, it's total cost divided by the number of passengers, hence the number of seats. So, in the first quarter of the year, we had 100 seats in market on a daily basis. In the second quarter, we've had 150. Come the 2nd of June, or the third quarter, if you will, we're going to have 200 seats in market. And right now, we're forecasting in September to be back to our normal level of service, or 400 plus seats in market. So the leading indicator is that the health of our business increases over the course of time. But that said, we've been obviously very short in terms of number of passengers to divide those fixed costs by for the start of 2021. So our recommendation then is that this year, if you look at that slide 4, we projected several months ago that we might need to invest $2.5 million of the relief funds into the 2021 budget. That's actually down to about 2.2 million now. So things are trending in the right direction because traffic's coming back better than we thought. And to justify that investment, we looked at what the airlines felt they needed to have in a cost per enplanement in order to serve our market. Now, remember, they got just so many airplanes. They've had a terrible time the last couple of years. And put those airplanes where they can make the greatest return per passenger. If we didn't invest this money this year, the cost per enplanement in Ithaca would be above $40. That's $2,000 a flight just for the privilege of coming to Ithaca. And it doesn't mention the charges for wherever we're going to when the airplane lands at one of our hubs. So our decision was that we wanted to invest, now it's the current number is 2.2 million, in order to get the cost per enplanement this year down to the vicinity of $13, which is what the airlines said they needed to have in order to be interested in the Ithaca market and bringing back service. So that's the proposal that's before you this morning. Now, when we say we're talking about investing 2.2 out of the federal relief fund, that still leaves us a balance of roughly $2 million for 2022, should we need it. But the intent here, remember, we're a business and this is cash reserve. The intent is to bring our operating tempo back up to the point where we have enough passengers coming through the terminal that the cost per passenger is affordable and that there's enough passenger facility charges to help with debt reduction and all that sort of thing. So it's a stimulus investment, which is exactly what the federal government had in mind when they gave us those 3 tranches. And so that's sort of how this all fits together. And we'll be back to you soon, I'm sure, because we are in an incredibly dynamic environment. I have a couple remarks after we're done with this issue, and I've answered any questions you have. But we'll be back regularly as we close out the year for sure.
And let me pose a question to the committee. Would you like Mike to go through the full Recondo report that is in your packet? And slide by slide, would you like that, or are you going to be happy with what we just heard when his report on that? Or Jason, do you have a feeling on that?
It's up to the committee, Mike.
Okay, what would you folks like to do? Not seeing anybody.
I can follow along in the packet.
It individually with you, which might be easier. We've got some technical challenges, with the graphics.
Okay, you want to just kind of go through it briefly, each of the slides, and then we'll look at it in our packet?
Well,
is that what you're asking, Ann?
I can go either way.
Dave or Glenn?
Either way with me.
Either way with me.
Okay. All right, well, let's just see if there are particular questions come along with it. Mike, you mentioned the fourth page. Are there other things that you want to point out?
No, I think that the big picture is a budget strategy issue, and it's a snapshot in time. It's our best choice after a great deal of discussion with a lot of stakeholders. It's our best choice for May of 2021. As I said, we'll be back with you, I'm sure, in a couple months as this whole thing plays out and we see if we're making our leading indicator projections of increasing traffic and what have you. But for right now, this is the right number. And of course, we would prefer that the traffic come back sooner than forecast and stronger than forecast, in which case the 2.5, which became 2.2, could become 1 point something, and that would leave us more money for 2022 and or for debt service, if we recover to the normal health of the airport. So that's the strategy that we're outlining, and but it's going to be dynamic. We're much more dynamic than any other part of the budget in terms of.
So I understand 2021 with the stimulus money. I think I understand 2022 with the stimulus money. What happens in 2023?
Well, if I could tell you what happens in 2023, I'd be someplace in Washington or beyond. We really don't know, Mike. This is our best chance right now to get back to the level of traffic that's required to support our economy, Cornell University, et cetera, and to have that level of traffic to divide out the $3.5 million cost of the airport to get a CPE that that works as part of the business model. I can't say anything more than that. I think I feel pretty optimistic that we'll be back to 120,000 employments plus. But again, if I had the crystal ball that could tell you that, I'd be on Wall Street or something, because the pandemic is still raging in much of the world, and including Tompkins County. We've got we're rated as a very high risk, and we don't really know what tomorrow brings. So,
but I guess I'm wondering that if we lower the employment fees, which I understand the rationale behind that, to try to keep the airlines here. Are we looking at $1 million deficit in 2023? Possibly. We're hoping to have enough income, even with lower fees, that would be able to make it so that we don't have to do the infusion of local money the way Broome and Chemung do.
Yeah,
their airports.
Any decision about local money is way out in the future right now. We're good through the rest of this year in 2022, and there's every prospect that we will be back at a level of passengers that is supportable by the infrastructure of the terminal and parking and what have you, that will allow us to do a balanced budget with no infusion of extra federal money or anything, and certainly no infusion of local money. But it would be very speculative to say that that's going to happen, given where we are in the world right now. I mean, there could be another pandemic. There could be all kinds of things that happen by 2023. But given the track we're on, with there's two kinds of forecasting. There's extrapolative and there's normative. And extrapolative forecasting doesn't work because it doesn't account for disruptive events like the pandemic. Normative forecasting says, yeah, this is a strong market. Our brand going in was built on diversity and inclusion. We speak your language, we cook your food, we celebrate your music, you're welcome here. That brand is even stronger today because so much of the world is cracked apart, that the value of a community that is welcoming has gone up amazingly compared to what it would have been had we not had the pandemic. So we think we're headed in good shape. We're positioned, and that's where we're going.
Jason.
I just think to answer your question is difficult, Mike, at this point. To say it simply, if air service doesn't recover to the extent that it needs to both maintain those low fees, then you either have to increase them or you have to use your general money to subsidize it to keep it low. And I don't think it's either going to increase, your traffic's going to increase and your passengers are going to increase, or they're not. And if they don't to that extent, then come, mid 2022 or so, if that hasn't recovered to that point, then that's where you'll make that decision as to what 23 will look like. I think it's probably too difficult to predict that right now. So to answer your question, if it doesn't recover, then you may be faced with that, or maybe faced with having higher fees.
So you're on board with the recommendation in this resolution that we have today?
I don't really know if you have a choice or not. I mean, if you don't do it, the airlines may say they might leave. If you do it, and they can still leave. There's no assurances that they're going to stay. They're saying they need this to be competitive in the market. You hope that it recovers your market. You hope that it helps recover your market quicker than others, and that you can hit stability sooner. So you try it, and if it works, then you continue to see how it progresses over time. And if it doesn't, then you have to take a different strategy.
Okay, thank you. Ann?
Thank you. I don't know if we want to bring this up now, but I'll just say it. We had the legislature received at least 3 emails from the public regarding food services not being available. So at some point, I want to talk with you about that before you leave today, Mike.
Well, I think it's fine to bring that up, Ann, and maybe Mike has a response.
Yeah, I would be happy to address that right now. And first of all, I think I'm aware legislators were kind enough to forward the 3 emails to me. They represent the frustration all of us are feeling about, a lack of a full service economy, if you will. June 3rd has been our target for recovering full service at the airport. That's when United Airlines resumed service to Washington, and there's enough of a market to sustain some of the peripheral services like food and the cafe operation. The cafe hung in there through January. They were losing a lot of money. We had, less than 100 people a day from the airlines coming through. You just can't run a business that way, like so many other businesses that have struggled during the year. So we put together a recovery plan, and it's June 3rd. While those 3 concerns that were expressed in email to you are concerns that we share and have had here at the airport, the fact is that a lot of people have been really complimentary of the fact that we stayed convenient and clean and open, throughout the pandemic, and allowed them to travel as they had to travel to deal with family emergencies and what have you. So we got a lot of positives. We got some people that are frustrated. We're frustrated. There are a lot of changes that have taken place over the last year, but we expect to be back offering the broader range of services that you expect, at that June 3rd date. So
there'll be partial food and drink services, or all food and beverages?
It's a little bit, I'll talk to you on the side about that. It's a little bit like the discussion we just finished about what 2023 is going to be like. We've got to see how this whole thing unfolds, but we are engaged with the cafe service. They're getting people back on the payroll. There are challenges there, as I think you've seen in the media nationwide, with the availability of people to come back to work in the service industries. There's hardly an industry that isn't struggling. So, we're headed back toward where we wanted to be, which is live food for all all of the flights. It's not going to be live food for all the flights on June 3rd, but there will be live food and drink available for the concentration of flights. It's a very, very tough market. You cannot sustain a food service based on the terminal. If you're Syracuse and you have 10 times as many passengers as we do here in Ithaca, you can make it work on the terminal alone. Here, there's got to be an attraction outside just the traveling public, and that's spelled Cornell Tech Park, among others. And the county's been going through a massive exercise about who's going to come back to work in person and who's going to work remotely, and so is Cornell. And so a lot of the peripheral market that allows us to sustain the level of food service and other things in the airport that we want to is still lagging in terms of recovery. That's a quick answer for now. I'd be happy to talk with you at greater length.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Jason? Your hand's still up, or is that? Guess not. Okay, so, well, do we want to then move forward and put this on the table? Resolution, budget adjustment, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID 10059. Someone want to?
Sorry, Mike.
Oh, Jason, did you have your hand up? Again?
No, I apologize. I did before. I apologize. I had a just quick phone call to take.
Oh, that's all right. So I'm asking if someone wants to move the resolution.
I'll move it. Mike.
Dave is seconding it. Let's go into any further discussion on the resolution. Are we all understanding what we're doing? We're allocating a big chunk of stimulus money here.
Mike, if I could just clarify a little bit, what you're doing is you're lowering these fees, the airline rental rate and the landing fees, to achieve that CP that Mike talked about. There'll have to be a time where they'll come back to you and budget capital and personnel to make a budget adjustment, which will actually be the actual amount that's needed. It's estimated, I think the resolution says 2.26 million. So that'll be done towards the end of the year, similar to what we did this year. So this is adjusting the rates. It's also adjusting some budget lines. So there's some increased expenses that were identified post-budget that will be, probably part of the budget moving forward. So you're appropriating fund balance to pay for some of those as well. So the use of federal money will probably be more relevant. I mean, the decrease in the fees will cause the need for use of this federal aid to offset the revenue loss as a result. And that'll come back to you for reconciliation towards the end of the year when you know more about the impact. You'll know more about that towards the end of the year.
Yeah, to Jason's point, we have to draw money, so to speak, from the cash reserves, and we don't know how much money we're going to have to draw. This is a budget adjustment, not an actual disbursement, if you will. So therefore, that's why we need to keep coming back to you as this plays out, because this situation is very dynamic, and every quarterly or whatever you want, monthly, we'll be happy to provide that update, and then eventually we'll begin to get a better feel, Mike Klein, for 2023 and whatnot.
The fact that you'll have to come back to us several times, I think, is a good thing for the committee, because we're dealing with these kind of a budget adjustment, which eventually would mean allocation of money. We want to be very, very careful as we go along. Dave McKenna.
Yeah, just a question. We're going to hold this in the general fund for the airport for a couple of years rather than pay down any of the debt service.
Well, Dave, my recommendation on that would be we need to wait to see what the tactical requirement for funds, the operational requirement for funds is before we commit any remainder to reducing the bond, for example, or what have you. That's a financial analysis that's hard to make. You know, we're still waiting for the no pipe alternative, which may arrive in our lifetime from NYSEG, which is another way that we're trying to push that bonding level down. And there are no simple decisions here, excepting to share information and make the best choices as we move forward. And it's just tough because the airport, really being a business, one of the comments from an air service board member who's in business was this budgeting cycle for the county is way out of line with what would happen in a business. And so here we are updating in a way that most of the departments don't need to because they have a more stable situation. We're just going to have to keep coming back and making sure that you and finance are fully apprised of how this situation is developing.
Okay, so basically we're gonna keep the money in limbo for a year or two until we.
I think what
Go
Jason
ahead.
is we're going to have a reconciliation at the end of the year. I mean, we did at the end of 2020. We had set aside in our minds 1.3 million, and it wound up to be slightly less than $1 million. The same thing's going to happen here. Today, we're talking about 2.5 million in March, having gone down to 2.2 million today in our estimate. Hopefully, it'll go down again. And by the end of the year, we'll say, okay, here's the dollar figure we need to balance out the budget with this money. And we're going to make that, as I said before, in the very beginning, we want to be very disciplined about expenses at the airport because, it's not like, hey, woohoo, we got $5 million. Let's go out there. We're trying to get the job done. And we're trying to have a little bit left over when the job is done to expend on capital issues rather than just replacement of lost income at the airport.
Yeah, I agree. I think, given the way things are, we won't know what 22 might look like until 21's over. So.
Right. And we may be doing this regularly through 22 also. I mean, it's
Right.
just it's really hard.
That's exactly my point. Okay.
Yeah.
That's exactly my point.
Hey,
Okay,
look,
thanks, Mike.
everything's looking good. Supposing the Indian variant lies outside of virus, supposing that virus lies outside of effective vaccination. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts and not a lot of certainty here, but this is our best shot for right now.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? I did want to say thank you to both Jason and Mike for working on this and meeting and coming forward with it. Are we ready to vote? All right, then let's go ahead. We'll start with Dave.
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That's unanimous.
Mike, I have a couple of other quick things, if I might.
Please.
So as of this morning, without the usual political announcement preceding it, we've been told that we've been awarded 1.2 million in AIP funding. It relates to two projects, the fire station snow removal project that we've talked about many times before, and also some taxiway work. And, it's design money, if you will. We'll give you a more comprehensive look at that next month if you like, because we've done a lot here today. Second thing is, it's really important for everybody to understand that COVID mitigation is a federal matter on airport property. TSA has changed our security condition, and you are required to wear a mask and socially distance on airport property. As a practical matter, it kind of amounts to the terminal. So curb to curb throughout your travel experience, no matter what state you're going to or what airline you're flying, you're going to be masked curb to curb. you're likely to get emails from disgruntled members of the public, because right now it's open up the doors and let the horses out of the barn. And that's not the case within the federal transportation system. So just so you're aware, there's a real distinction there. Two other issues that we need to get into, DMV testing pad and TCAT. I've gotten a lot of interest out of Albany in both subjects, and I don't want to take your time this morning, but TCAT in particular, was moving forward to relocating, and now I don't know if that's their position. So we'll need to address that subject going forward. But if we decide that those projects are viable, there's real infrastructure money interest in those projects. That's it.
You're talking about infrastructure money from DMV?
I'm talking about infrastructure money from somewhere.
I'm talking about the CDL side, I guess.
It could be, it's going to be federal or New York State. It'll be DOT money.
DOT money, okay.
Perhaps pass through DMV. That's an administrative question that would have to be resolved once we got to the point where public funders were interested in this project, but there's, both of them are live subjects, particularly in light of all the discussion about a massive infrastructure bill to be part of the stimulus of the overall economy.
Okay. Before you're gone, Mike, I just wanted to mention that I attended the Air Services Board meeting this week and heard a very interesting presentation from the Big Red Consulting. And if folks don't know what that is the MBA graduate students at Cornell group that helps with different issues at the airport. And most recently, they've been working on what a flight from Ithaca to JFK might look like and what it would take to attract passengers to that, including costs and other kinds of things. But they made a very interesting presentation to us. And Mike, I'd be glad to if you have any comments on that as well.
Well, Cornell has been, first of all, for many, many years, we had service to New York, air service to New York City. And then as demand in that market grew and grew and grew, and they started regulating flights with slots or reservations to go into New York, our market wasn't competitive. All that changed as a result of the pandemic. You've got one of our carriers, Delta Airlines, waiting to see the results of the the resolution that you passed this morning before they commit. But they have a tremendous amount of infrastructure investment in the New York City airports, particularly Kennedy and LaGuardia. But Kennedy's the one of interest because of international, and it's going underutilized. So where once upon a time we were slot limited, now they're looking for more flights into New York. And I think we have a stable market. And if we could day trip it down in the morning, back at night, competitive with the bus plus a hotel, because it's hard to day trip on the bus, and we're not sure what's going to happen with the bus anyway. I think there's a strong market there. We're pitching it to Delta and on behalf of Cornell, and as you said, Mike, having these bright young minds help us, throw the net widely and bring in a lot of information is very helpful. We've worked with them every year that I've been here at the airport.
Thanks for that. Okay, anything before we let Mike go here?
Mike's got,
and I want to thank Roxanne for being here too, and Josh.
Mike's got to run a state board meeting here, so I'm going to drop off if you don't have any more questions. And I really appreciate your time this morning. And once again, if you want any of the rest of the iceberg that's beneath the surface in detail, please just give me a shout. We'll get together and give you as much detail as you want.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to the Highway Department. Jeff Smith.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
the only thing I have on the agenda today is a capital payment summary report. Want to look at that? If you have any questions, I can answer.
That's an information item, folks. Anybody, do we have any questions on that one? Not seeing any. Thank you. Yeah, you're going to stay for our discussion, hopefully, about the bridges.
Mike?
See, Arel has come on. Arel, did you need to talk to us this morning? Oh, I see his name anyway. Arel? All right. Let's move on. Why don't we get the minutes done? I'm sorry.
And Koreman has a question.
Oh, hi, Ann. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question for Jeff before we got into the other discussion. Did Town of Ulysses contact you yet regarding an overage on some of their estimates for one of their bridge projects?
I just got an email during this meeting about a half hour ago. I was aware that the bid openings happened for the Cemetery Road Street Bridge, and that they came in a little high. And I am aware that there's the need for that discussion to consider. I haven't talked to them directly, but I do have an email and I'm aware of the numbers.
Okay, so they had contacted me. Well, I was talking to them about something else, and so I said, as far as I was aware, that they should contact you. So is that the correct thing?
Yeah, it really closely aligns with the conversation we're having next. As an example of bridge costs, when local municipalities are willing to manage a project, and the county, and just helping everyone in general on having that. There is an agreement in place that we are going to pay the 5% with Ulysses. We did form that agreement. Just to not get into it too far. I think we're going to be talking about it here in a minute, but the bids came back in and they're over that 5% that we've already agreed to. So Ulysses is wondering really what the next step is. And there's, other things around that subject as well, but it's yet to be decided on as far as where we go next. And quite honestly, the next discussion hopefully can move along relatively quickly, and we can get some policy formed. More for this type of situation with Ulysses, because they're going to want to know quickly. And I don't want to get into it too deep right now, but it's definitely it needs to be talked about. And
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
yeah.
Well, why don't we take the minutes, see if we can get those off the agenda here. Someone want to move the minutes of April 15th? Ann moves them. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. Discussion about the minutes? Let's vote. Glenn?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
I vote aye. That's okay. We got those done. All right, now let's talk about the program for reimbursement to towns for money that they will front on this Bridge New York program for bridges. And we know we've done one, or I guess we've done two, haven't we, Jeff? We did the George Road Bridge, and we did one in Ulysses. Am I right there?
So the bridge in Ulysses is from the second round.
Oh, it will be. Okay.
And so it was just the bid opening just happened.
Well, let me start out a couple of things and say, first of all, a lot is said that these programs save the county a lot of money. And that's true, but that assumes that we would never get any state or federal funding for these bridges in the future if they were still on our bridge program. So what's nice about it is that it gives us a quicker route to get these bridges built than if we had to wait the way we always did. Back in the 1940s, The county passed a resolution to take over town bridges on county roads and assist to the towns. Remember back then, we were a board of supervisors, and the supervisors of the towns, plus some elected supervisors in the city, met and governed the county. Anybody who's taken a look at that structure of government knows that one of the things that makes the town's supervisors always happy is if they can shift costs from the town to the county for protection of their own taxpayers. And that's fine. But that's why we have county roads that go through towns and why we now have county bridges. Now, that does not apply to the city. However, the city's bridges, they can apply much like a county for federal and state funding the way we do. And that's one of the good things that we can do for the town bridges is apply for that funding. Now, when we agreed to take that over, the understanding was that the wearing surfaces and approaches would be paid for and maintained by the towns in question. Later on, when we were having some financial issues about bridges at the county, and I think it was in the 90s that there was a different split of the amount of money that was spent or was charged to the town. So there was a little increase there. And is it 20% now, Jeff? Just so I understand that.
The idea,
town share.
Yeah, the local share in the last several agreements has remained at 20%.
Okay, but that was changed from the original 1940s.
There's a most recent older agreement that I've uncovered back in the early 80s with the town of Ithaca that has it at 16%. And we've done some research, and I think it's really just it's an overall average, and not to get into it too deep, but when you're bidding these projects out, I think they want to simplify it to total cost, local share, looking at what percentage makes sense based on those wearing services, that approach rail, that sort of thing. You could get into like the finite detail of a bridge, and I think for simplicity, they went from 16 to 20 based on averages. And
I remember it increased slightly. Towns weren't terribly happy about it, but it did. It made it, I think, fairer when that was gone to 20%.
Yeah, everything I've been seeing in the last 9 years have spent 20%.
Yeah, the other point I want to make is that it's not just building the bridge; it's the maintenance of the bridge. We have to maintain the bridge up to state standards. We have a part of our highway department that is allocated just for bridge work. We have to paint the bridges. We have to wash the bridges. We have to make sure that the structural steel is safe. We have to worry about scour and other things in the banks and in the wing walls of the bridges themselves. Those are all things that we have to do for town bridges that are maintained by the county every year. And when the state comes through and inspects bridges and flags them, we have to do the repairs on those. And we know, for example, what's happened with the Freeze Road Bridge, where the structure, it's so old, it's like what, over 100 years old. And We got scour. The bridge dropped on one end back in 1981. It had to be the approach wall had to be rebuilt back then. These things happen with bridges. We have to maintain them constantly. So they are a county expense. And that's why it's important that the county understand what its obligation will be when it builds a bridge or has a built, in this case, has a bridge built. You take our average bridge, and I would think the one that was built most recently at George Road is a good example of that. It was a town funded bridge, fairly not unusual 2-lane bridge, functioning very well on that road. And we said, yes, we are able to get this bridge built more quickly. And it makes sense to allocate the money for the town's share to the town, as basically saying, we appreciated your following through on this with the state and has helped us under the Bridge New York program. But we have a bridge at the George Road Bridge, which we expect will be normal maintenance. We will do all the things we always do with them: wash them, paint them, inspect them, reinforce them when necessary, those kinds of things. Now you take another bridge, as is proposed at Freeze Road, and you're talking about adding a lot of amenities onto that bridge that would not normally be on a county bridge. While there might be a sidewalk, we probably wouldn't be cantilevered with an observation deck. And I don't think we have any bridges in Tompkins County on town or county roads which are 1-lane traffic signal bridges. And just, maintaining those signals could be very expensive. Not to mention that we have to pay for the electricity for them forever. This is a bridge is a 50-year item at the minimum. And we've seen many, many bridges go much more than 50 years that we've had. So I just wanted to lay some of those things back and to start our discussion. Having said that, I think it's very, very important that we have policy here, that it be fair, but that we make sure that we are protecting our county taxpayers and doing what we normally do and not being given a lot of extra costs unless we agree to them. And I think that that's where we have to start a discussion. Dan Klein couldn't be here today, but he sent me an email and said he was glad that the discussion would be continuing at least till next time. And he had a statement he said I could read. And I will read that. He says, I fully support the idea of intermunicipal cooperation concerning building and maintaining infrastructure. If a town, for example, were to receive funding for a project that would have otherwise fallen to the county, it is a desirable outcome. However, if the county is to own and maintain that infrastructure, then the county must give its approval to the project from application all the way through execution. So that's something he's thinking about, I assume, in the policy. I think those are good suggestions. And that's something with the Freeze Road Bridge that we seem to have been sidelined and not having approved this project from the beginning. But we don't want that to happen in the future. So we need to think about what the bridge it is, what the maintenance costs are going to be, and who's going to pay for those maintenance costs. If they're over and beyond what we would have normally with a bridge, then maybe the town that has elected those kinds of maintenance costs is going to have to stand them. I can't think, and this is fairly normal with highway construction. If you look back at the old records, when they built the original concrete roads like Route 13 in the state in the late 1919, 1920 era, that kind of time, they would bring the concrete road through. But when they got to a village, for example, if the village wanted it to be a little wider in its downtown area or a city, let's say, then the betterments, as they were called betterments, would be charged to that municipality. Yes, the state would build the basic road, but the second or wider lane or the drainage or other kinds of things would be charged to the municipality. So I don't think that that is anything that wouldn't be historically similar if we were to add that to a policy. So I've talked a long time here, but I wanted to make those points, and I'm going to open it up for other folks that would like to speak. Ann.
Thanks, Mike. Right now, a few things are coming to mind for me. One overarching thing is, yes, I would like to see some policy and included in there some procedures, maybe some education, maybe some, for instance, with the town of Ulysses, I believe that they said at one point, well, you know, if next time that they do a bridge, they're going to make sure to see if they can wrap in their engineering fees, because it was something they hadn't thought of, that they could wrap into the project. So maybe some education or with the municipalities on how to, the best practices for doing this. And then requiring, for instance, an MOU at some point, you know, like that there's kind of like a timeline or a procedure, step-by-step guidelines of, okay, here's what you do when, and so for instance, an MOU with the county can be part of that. If we want to do approvals and if that's allowable, if that's not going to hurt or interfere in the municipalities doing these projects, rather than just asking for approval at the county level on certain projects, maybe if we could do approval on all projects so that it's just routine rather than it's an exception. So that's just one idea I have. And I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Dave.
Thanks. I'd just like to say that I was chair of this committee back near the beginning of this project. And I believe we did specify that we wanted a 2-lane bridge. And I don't think there was really any question what the county wanted. But I don't want to argue over it. I'm just saying that's my recollection of what went down. Beyond that, I think that Mike's correct. You know, these amenities, excess amenities on bridges, they're okay, but I think we have to have an agreement that as to how they're going to get paid for. For example, I really don't feel that the county should be responsible for the traffic lights on Freeze Road. They wanted a 1-lane bridge. They fought for it. They got it. That's great. Okay, I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think we should have to pay for the fact that they wanted to make that change. So as far as the sidewalk goes and stuff like that, I'm not sure that's a big deal, but you know, it's a one-time cost, but the maintenance of those lights is an ongoing cost year after year after year. So that's my 2 cents. But I'm definitely in favor of, you know, the county supporting their 5%. And I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you. Martha Robertson.
Thank you, Mike. A couple of questions and then some comments. Of course, the 5%, George Road Bridge ended up being 20, the county paid 22%. Is that right, Jeff? And now you're talking about Ulysses, where the local share would be more than the original 5%. So, and I understand it happens with the projects that we do start to finish also, where you start and design something and you end up bidding it a year later and then the costs go up. So that's typical, that's not unusual. So I would think any sort of policy would need to figure out a way to accept that kind of adjustment in the cost, because even with that, even when we paid 22% for George Road, that was still less than the 80% we would normally pay without the Bridge New York program. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, yes, it was less. And just to throw this out there, I just did the math and it's 18% will be the total local share for the Cemetery Road in Ulysses, just to have a number.
Right.
Overage of the.
So going over 5% it really needs to be dealt with, because if the municipalities think that the reimbursement is going to be kept at 5% of say the original cost, then the whole program kind of falls apart. Jeff, I asked you at one point about maintenance of the county. Does the county maintain the traffic light at Warren and Hanshaw? I think those are both our roads, right?
All the traffic lights on county roads we maintain.
And I asked you about what that costs and what that involves on an annual basis. And you weren't sure. I think you said you contracted out.
Yeah, we contract with a vendor for that. Also the lights at Pine Tree and Ellis Hollow. I'd have to look back through the records. We do have a line item in our budget that takes care of that cost. And it's really a shot in the dark, because when they go down, we call them, they come down from Syracuse. So there's an agreement prepared of what their billing costs were going to be, but how much we have to use that varies greatly from year to year. But I can look back and give you a history on that if it's necessary.
Okay.
If I could say one more thing. No, go ahead, Martha. I'm not going to stop you. Go ahead.
Well, just that those lights are complicated signal lights that are on all the time. I believe at Freeze Road, we're talking about it. I'm not sure. I mean, I think for one thing, the design isn't finished, as Dan Lamb said. Everything's not done yet. But my understanding is it's sort of going to be motion activated. They'll only be blinkers. It's not going to be a full red light, green light, yellow light with turn signals and all the rest of it, as I understand that. I think it's going to be far simpler than those other applications. So, but anyway, the county does a lot of traffic light maintenance. If this were included, this would be part of a much larger contract. You're muted, Jeff. Are you saying something to us or mumbling?
Somebody else. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we do a lot of traffic light maintenance. I think that's the thing. I can still remember when we debated putting the light in for the town of Ithaca, in the town of Ithaca on the county road at Warren Road. There was a strong debate about that, whether we do it. I can still remember we had to come back, had the contractor come back and run a cable so the lights wouldn't sway as much. And I think it was cost $4,000 or $5,000 to have that cable put on.
Okay. The point.
I can still remember the costs of these things are not inexpensive. That was years ago.
Okay. The point is that certainly within a multi-million-dollar bridge project, this is number one. This is not the only traffic light system that the county maintains, and it'll probably be the simplest of the kinds that we maintain or that we own, et cetera. So. I think one issue is like, Freeze will be a new bridge. It's not like I understand the maintenance of let's say if they had gone down the route of restoring the historic structure, that maintenance is a more complicated and expensive process. But this will be a new bridge. It's just that it's 1.5 instead of 2 lanes. And so in a sense, maintenance is going to be, if anything, less on the bridge itself because it's smaller, but it will be new. So I think at the end of the day, this is likely to be like maybe the only one of these. I mean, how many 1-lane bridges do we have in the county at all? This is a situation where like Bridge New York and Cemetery Road, those are 2-lane bridges being replaced by 2-lane bridges. So there wasn't a great deal of conversation that didn't need to be. So I think this is a relatively big mountain made out of a little molehill. I think at the end of the day, it appears that the costs are going to be under the original budget because of a number of issues, that it's 1 lane instead of 2, that they won't require rebuilding Freeze Road, and a number of other issues. So I would.
Can I ask you, we're talking about a policy. Are you suggesting that the county would pay for any amenities that the town wants?
No, I think that needs to be negotiated, but the message has been kind of stiff-arming the town. So let me just say now, in terms of the sidewalk or the pedestrian access, and I understand, for example, the Forest Home bridges have the same kind of sidewalk or pathway for pedestrians, and that the town maintains those side parts. So there's precedent for that. I think perhaps
Is that true, Jeff?
I
Okay.
think perhaps the town of Dryden.
Yep.
I think perhaps the town of Dryden may not have had full conversations about this yet because the design is still being developed with DOT and the federal folks. So I guess I would say, as a county policy, we want to encourage biking and pedestrian travel. We have a long-standing, 20-year policy about encouraging multimodal transportation for a whole bunch of reasons. So I would think a pedestrian access that improves safety, improves walkability, and on all of our corridors should really become, if it's not already, should become something the county wants to promote, so that people can, because these linkages are really critical. If somebody can't, somebody may want to, do a whole trail ride, and if they're stuck on a bad bridge, that eliminates, the attractiveness of the whole trail. So I would think that could be something that really we should see as a general matter, as something that's promoting one of our strong values of sustainability and healthy communities. So anyway, my points are simply, I think when we're talking about the actual dollars involved in this bridge, we don't know what they are yet. They're likely to be under the original budget, which is not true of other ones we've approved. It will be a new bridge, so no additional maintenance required than other new bridges. And I think, Mike, when you attack this as a political process, the point is that political means public. I mean, the community, that's the neighborhood that's most affected. That is what the federal process and the state process require, that there is public comment and public engagement. If you want to call that political, well,
No, that's not what I'm talking about when I say political,
Okay.
but let's go ahead.
So, and I think,
We always do.
right, well, then we needed to actually consider that public process before signing an MOU that determined the outcome when, in fact, the size of the bridge was really a key part of the whole public process.
Well, I'll just go along with Dave and say, let's just move on. But how are we going to proceed? Jeff, I assume that your department's going to have some, want to have some input into any kind of policy we establish here. And I know Ann's done some work. She's been on a policy, and the rest of us have some ideas here. Can we start circulating this before our next meeting and see if we can come up with a proposal that we can hopefully put through at the next meeting or the meeting after that at the latest? I'm sorry? Oh, hi, Jason. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Just a few thoughts for what it's worth. You may want to think about doing a resolution versus actual formal policy, because I think you're going to, once you get into this, depending on how much in the weeds you want to get, it's going to be really difficult. And I would say you may want to keep it broad and based on a resolution. The other thing, just as being an observer throughout this for the past several years, several things you have to keep in mind about is how do you want to engage in these projects or not? Do you want to be engaged or do you not want to be engaged? And if you're engaged, is it going to be political engagement or is it going to be professional engagement? And that's where I think this particular project went off the rails from an observer's perspective. And if you want to be overly engaged in these projects, then you have to be able to make the decision up front to say you want to have final say over this or you don't want to have final say over it. And you can try to develop a policy around that. But when you're getting into these individual projects and individual communities, you have to say, I'm hands off and I'm going to generally support these types of costs or this type of local match. We're not going to do long-term maintenance. We are going to do long-term maintenance. But this project got overly political. You had individual legislators getting into the ongoing discussions, which has ultimately perpetuated into where you are today, which is a he said, she said back and forth. And you cannot predict cost at this point in time with what this project will be. It's impossible because you don't know what the final design is, and you don't know what it's bid at. I can tell you right now, your cost estimates will be 20 to 30% what their estimates are now based on what they're bid, based on construction costs. So to try to compare what the cost of this is and your local share is going to be and what it's actually going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now is completely erroneous. My point is you have to take a higher level perspective. If you want to be overly engaged and make the final decision on the design, then say it that way. If you don't, then back off of it. But what happened with this is some of you got intricately involved with this, and that's where it went off the rails, frankly, to be honest with you. And I don't want to get into the he said, she said, but that's what's getting mixed up in this. And now the mixed message is being set up to the municipalities is we're not going to support this. I think from day one, we've said, at least from a staff's perspective, we think these are good. We want to support the local share because these are good projects. If you want to let the local community set that design, great, set some broad parameters on it and then step away. Otherwise, be full in and say you want to approve every final design, because I don't think you can ride the fence. Otherwise, I think you're going to be caught in this situation every time. Someone either in the district or outside the district is going to say, I don't like that element of the design, and then they're going to go after it and you're going to go back and forth on it. So I think you've got to be either all in, saying you're the final say, or step off and give broad parameters and let them design it. That's just my observation of it.
Thank you. Something more, Martha? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. The role of a legislator is to represent their community. Shauna pointed out at the last, I think when this came up at the legislature, that, you know, she didn't like the Forest Home bridges as one-lane bridges, but she supported the community, that's what the community wanted. And I'm not going to apologize for asking that the MOU be held back because back in 2017, because it specified a politically charged decision. It did. It was taking a 1-lane bridge to a 2-lane bridge. It was prejudging the public process that was required. It was, and the public process hadn't even started. And as I said, if it had been agnostic about the design, then fine. But I think that is the role of a legislator, to pay attention to what the community is looking for and to speak up on behalf of that. And I think the result is going to be fine. And Jason, you're right, that we don't know what the costs are. Like we didn't know what the costs were for George, and we paid it anyway. We didn't know what the costs were for Ulysses, for Cemetery Road. And I hope we'll pay it anyway, because again, it's still millions of dollars less than we would have had to pay on our own. And it's not trivial that because we can do these with the towns, we multitask, in other words. So Jeff, you couldn't manage 3 or 4 new bridge projects a year, I assume. You don't have the staff for that. Because the towns are actually managing these projects, it's not just that they save us money, but in a sense, they're force multipliers for us. They are doing staff work that otherwise our staff would have to do. So that, and everybody in this committee certainly knows that the longer you wait to repair a facility, the more dangerous it is, the more expensive it probably is to repair it, et cetera. So it is a meaningful benefit that we can multitask by having Ulysses do a bridge and Dryden do 2 bridges and Caroline do a bridge at the same time the county does our own projects. So.
All right, this has gone beyond what we should have in the policy here.
Yeah, I think the policy, obviously language it really matters what the words are. But I think that there should be certainly negotiation about maintenance needs to be figured out. And engagement with the design, throughout the process is a good idea. But I really don't think this bridge should be singled out because it was an unusual bridge.
So I'm going to suggest that we send suggestions and input on Jason's recommending a resolution. So that's the way I think that the way we should proceed. Let's send it in to Katrina and she can help us put it together and then send out for all of us to see what everybody else says and then see if we can't come up with something that we can all support. Anything else from anyone? Glenn?
On this resolution, are you going to include our approval, the application phase and design phase? Because I think it's very restrictive and you'll discourage all the towns from coming to do any project with the county.
Well, we have at least one member of the committee would like to see us have approval at the beginning and before we have to accept it. And I think there's going to be county approval here somewhere, at least in my view. What do you think?
Well, I think we should maybe have approval process through the project, but we could easily put in a clause that says that the town will be responsible for all the costs outside the standard construction and design services. That would stop the lighting, that would stop the sidewalks, that would stop the, the guards and all that stuff. So.
I agree with that. Okay, so let's just send it in and let's see what we can put together. Jeff, and any thoughts that your department and you department have, please send it in and go ahead if you'd like to say some more.
Yeah, I'll put this in writing, and that's probably better for me to do that than to be speaking on record. But my thoughts are, and I really appreciate what Jason was saying and diving into things, all the elements of the bridges are identified, have always been identified in previous MOU agreements, who is responsible for what after construction. So I really feel strongly that those elements should be left out of a policy. And I think that if you want to deal with certain thresholds of how for approvals or things like that, that's fine. Funding is huge. I think that's a big part of it. Are you going to pay 5 to 20%? Over 20%, it needs to be reviewed by someone or something like that. I'm all on board for that, but I think the elements of the bridge is both contained in New York State highway law when the counties took over the bridge. It's very well identified. There's a lot of previous MOUs to review and look at. Every bridge is different. Every bridge is going to have a different element or an aspect to it. So that's going to be very difficult to encapsulate into one statement of who does what and who. So once the bridge is constructed, so backing up a little bit, I think also on the funding in the 5 or 20 or whatever we decide to do or a range, I wouldn't want to separate elements during construction either. I think the price of the bridge is the price of the bridge. And as it goes forward, that local share has a cap on it, has a minimum, has a maximum for the county to pay. Understanding there's always going to be elements and there's scope and project limits and things like that. But to try and separate certain elements, like I was saying, out in a policy form, what we're going to pay and not pay for construction in the original bridge scope process, that would also be difficult. So in that area, I would recommend a range of local, covering whatever local share. And then on the other end, on the maintenance end, through the MOU, we'll square out who maintains what going forward under the MOU, instead of it being contained in a policy. That's going to be difficult to itemize all those things. So, and I want to just say one more thing, in that this was one of our concerns early on that we brought about, and you know how I feel about the whole thing. But our personnel maintaining a single lane bridge are more at hazard, and it's not as safe than a 2-lane bridge. We have to shut traffic down. So everybody's saying a lot of things, and I want to make that clear. That was talked about, has been talked about. It's kind of been forgotten. And I'm speaking from our own county personnel respect and a safety respect. And regardless of what goes forward, I just want everybody to understand that there is several aspects that aren't constantly being mentioned regarding 2-lane and single lane. And one of them is for that. And bridges are 50 years, 75 years. So we're not talking about anybody around here at the department. I'm talking about people in the future that are going to have to go out there and maintain that bridge. And it would also be very unusual for a county to maintain a traffic signal on a town road. And that's all I want to say about that. I just didn't want to interject before, and that's getting into the weeds there. But overall, I'll put those thoughts of mine into a memo and I'll send it to Katrina. Thank you.
Jeff, our standard bridges, am I correct that we always consider multimodal use for them? Sidewalk, bicycles, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's when you're talking about the legislature giving approval, what comes into my mind is we have to go through multiple approvals. There's a professional engineer that's designing it that in its own way is meeting current standards. That's a lot of the problems that people have with bridges like this one that we kind of talking about mostly is the width. It's the width of the bridge. And to access federal funding, Bridge New York, that sort of thing, they require a minimum shoulder width. Well, that's for safety, pedestrian, bicycle safety. So yes, it's already there. Very typical bridge. It's already going to have the width. Back to the approval piece, the state has oversight. So my concern with too many approvals at the county level is it can delay projects. And if the approval comes to us for us to make at the wrong time, it's a whole nother month. to get the resolution passed, things like that. So we're already, you hear me quite often waiting for the state to approve things or giving us a notice to proceed and things like that. These projects always run long in the form that they are now. There's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of state approved professional engineers following standards that are already set on all of these bridges. So I want to also caution on how many approvals we want to do. We want everybody to be on the same page, but we don't want to slow the process down and just end up hurting ourselves.
Thank you for that. Okay, do we know how we're heading forward?
Jason and Ann.
Oh, Ann, you put your hand up again, and then Jason got his hand up again. No, you still got a hand up.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Ann.
I was also going to suggest, if you're talking about folks to work on a policy, Deborah Dawson had also started working on that. And so I think it'd be good to have somebody from our budget committee, because this will have financial implications.
Sure, we're glad to have input from any legislator. Okay, we're ready to end this discussion and move on to adjournment. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Glenn? Ann? All in favor of adjourning? Thank you all. Thanks for going over this morning. I think it was all very important stuff we did today. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
So long.
Thanks, everybody.